I think I didn't do anything wrong, just told the truth about one last time with my ex. So when the envelope from the lawyer landed on my kitchen table, I honestly couldn't believe he would go this far. I never expected the man I called my husband would turn everything upside down just because I said what everyone else was thinking. But maybe I should start from the beginning, from that dinner that changed everything. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The rehearsal dinner was supposed to be perfect. We'd booked the upscale restaurant downtown, the one with the exposed brick walls and Edison bulb lighting that made everyone look glamorous in photos. Daniel had been quiet all day, which I'd attributed to pre-wedding nerves. After all, renewing our vows after 7 years of marriage was a big deal. I was feeling confident that night, wearing the emerald dress that brought out my eyes. Julia, my younger sister, had already complimented me 3 times, and even Daniel's usually critical mother Helen had nodded approvingly when we arrived. The champagne was flowing, the conversation was lively, and I felt like the center of attention, exactly where I belonged. "So, Alethea," called out my friend Marcus from across the table, "any last-minute cold feet about recommitting to this guy?" He gestured toward Daniel with his wine glass, grinning. The table laughed, and I felt the spotlight on me. This was my moment to be witty, to show everyone how modern and secure I was in my relationship, how evolved we both were. "Oh, please," I said, waving my hand dismissively. If anything, Daniel should be worried. I just had one last hurrah with my ex Evan last week. You know, to get it completely out of my system before we do this whole renewal thing. The laughter started to die down. I noticed a few confused glances, but I pressed on, encouraged by Julia's encouraging nod. I mean, everyone has that one ex, right? The one that never quite goes away? I figured it was better to be honest about it and handle it like adults. One last time, and then it's done forever. Clean slate. The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel's fork had stopped midway to his mouth. His face had gone completely white. "Alethea," he said quietly, "what are you talking about?" I felt the first flutter of unease, but I was committed now. "Oh, come on, Danny. Don't be such a prude. It's 2023. Everyone understands that marriage doesn't erase history. I was just being honest about closure." Helen's sharp intake of breath cut through the air. Paul, Daniel's father, was staring at his plate like it held the secrets of the universe. My mother Janice was frozen with her wine glass halfway to her lips. "You're joking, right?" Daniel's voice was barely above a whisper. "Why does everyone look so serious?" I laughed, but it sounded forced even to my own ears. "It's not like it meant anything. It was just closure. Physical closure. You're acting like I committed some crime." Julia jumped in to support me. "Exactly. Alethea's just being honest about her needs. Not everyone can handle that level of transparency in a relationship." But the damage was already done. Daniel slowly placed his napkin on the table and stood up. His movements were deliberate, controlled. "Excuse me," he said to the table. "I need some air." He walked out without looking back, leaving 24 people staring at me in various states of shock, confusion, and judgment. "He's just being sensitive," I said to the remaining guests, trying to salvage the evening. "You know how men get about their egos. He'll come around." But as the evening limped toward its conclusion, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd miscalculated something fundamental. By the time I got home that night, Daniel's car was already in the driveway. I found him in our bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed with his head in his hands. He'd changed out of his suit into jeans and a t-shirt, and somehow that made everything feel more real, more final. "Danny, we need to talk about what happened tonight," I began, closing the door behind me. "I think there was a misunderstanding." He looked up at me with eyes I barely recognized. "A misunderstanding?" "Alethea, You announced to our entire family that you slept with your ex-boyfriend last week. What exactly did I misunderstand? I sat down next to him, reaching for his hand, but he pulled away. You're making this bigger than it is. Yes, I saw Evan. Yes, we had closure, but it doesn't change anything between us. If anything, it makes our renewal more meaningful because now I know for sure that you're who I want to be with. Closure. He repeated the word like it tasted bitter. You call sleeping with another man closure. I call it being honest about my emotional needs, I shot back, feeling defensive. Most women would have just done it and never told their husbands. I was trying to be transparent with you. Transparent? Daniel stood up, starting to pace. Transparent would have been telling me before you did it. Transparent would have been asking how I felt about it. What you did was cheat on me and then humiliate me in front of everyone we know. I could feel my temper rising. Oh, so now I'm a cheater? Daniel, we've been together for 7 years. We have a daughter together. One night with someone from my past doesn't erase all of that. You're being incredibly insecure right now. Insecure? His voice cracked slightly. Alethea, you betrayed our marriage and then bragged about it at our rehearsal dinner. How am I supposed to react to that? Like a mature adult who understands that love isn't about possession, I said, standing to face him. Like someone who trusts that I chose to come home to you. Everyone has a past, Daniel. I can't help it if you're too insecure to handle the fact that I'm a complete person with a history. My phone buzzed with a text from Julia. Don't let him make you feel guilty. You were just being authentic. If he can't handle a strong woman, that's his problem. The validation felt good, and I showed Daniel the message. See? Julia gets it. This is about you not being able to handle the fact that I'm not some naive little wife who pretends she never had feelings for anyone else. Daniel read the text, and something in his expression shifted. It became colder, more distant. Is that what you think this is about? My ego? Isn't it? I challenged. You're acting like I committed some unforgivable sin when all I did was be honest about getting closure with someone important from my past. If you trusted me, if you really loved me, you'd understand that this makes our relationship stronger. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he went to our closet and pulled out a suitcase. What are you doing? I asked, a flutter of panic in my chest. I'm going to stay at my parents' house tonight. I need space to think. You're being ridiculous, I said, but my voice was less confident now. It's our wedding weekend, Daniel. We have a ceremony in 2 days. Do we? He paused in his packing. Because right now, I can't imagine standing up in front of God and our families and promising to love and honor someone who thinks betrayal is just closure. Fine, I said, crossing my arms. Run to Mommy and Daddy. But don't expect me to chase after you. I'm not going to apologize for being honest about my needs. He zipped up the suitcase and headed for the door. Then he paused. I'm taking Sophie with me. What? No, Daniel, you can't just take our daughter because you're having a tantrum. I'm not having a tantrum, Alethea. I'm protecting my daughter from whatever this is. He gestured between us. She doesn't need to see her parents like this. After he left, the house felt enormous and empty. I called Julia, who came over with wine and reassurance. He'll come around, she said, settling onto the couch beside me. Men always do. He's just processing his feelings. Give him a day or two, and he'll realize he's being dramatic. But as I lay in bed that night, alone for the first time in years, I couldn't shake the image of Daniel's face when I'd shown him Julia's text. He hadn't looked angry or hurt anymore. He'd looked done. By Monday morning, the gossip had spread through my workplace like wildfire. I could feel the stares and whispers as I walked to my desk, and by lunchtime, 3 different co-workers had found excuses to stop by my cubicle with thinly veiled questions about how the wedding went. It was postponed, I said tersely to Margaret from HR when she asked about honeymoon photos. Family emergency. but I could see in her eyes that she'd already heard something. The story was out there, mutating and growing with each telling. I decided to get ahead of it. During my lunch break, I crafted a carefully worded social media post, taking a break from wedding planning to reflect on double standards in modern relationships. Funny how honesty and emotional authenticity are only valued until they challenge someone's comfort zone. Growth requires uncomfortable conversations. Not everyone is ready for that level of real talk. Authenticity. Trach our modern love. Trach a growth mindset. Within an hour, I had dozens of comments. Some were supportive, mostly from Julia and a few of my more progressive friends, but others were less kind. "Girl, what did you do?" commented Sarah, one of my college friends. "Praying for your family during this difficult time," posted my Aunt Linda, which somehow felt worse than outright criticism. But the comment that stung the most was from Daniel's sister Emma. "Some honesty is just cruelty in disguise. Sophie deserves better." I screenshot Emma's comment and sent it to Julia with a string of angry emojis. Her response came back immediately. "She's just being loyal to Daniel. Don't let his family gaslight you into thinking you did something wrong." That afternoon, Sophie's teacher called. Mrs. Patterson's voice was gentle but concerned. "Mrs. Moreland, I wanted to check in about Sophie. She's been quite withdrawn today, and when I asked her about the weekend, she said Mommy and Daddy were having big feelings. I just wanted to make sure everything is okay at home." The implication was clear, and it made my stomach twist with anger. "Everything is fine, Mrs. Patterson. We're just going through some family adjustments. I'd appreciate it if the school didn't make assumptions about our personal life." "Of course," she said quickly. "I just want to make sure Sophie has the support she needs." After I hung up, I tried calling Daniel. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again an hour later. Same thing. Finally, I called Helen's house directly. "Moreland residence," came Paul's careful voice. "Paul, it's Alethea. I need to speak to Daniel." There was a pause. "I'm sorry, Alethea, but Daniel doesn't want to take your calls right now." "That's ridiculous. We need to talk about Sophie at minimum. Her teacher called today, and she's clearly upset about this whole situation. Daniel is being selfish by keeping her from me." "Alethea," Paul's voice was firmer now. "Sophie is fine. She's safe, she's loved, and she's where she needs to be right now." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means that Daniel is making decisions based on what's best for his daughter." His daughter. Not our daughter. The distinction hit me like a slap. "Paul, I don't know what Daniel has told you, but—" "He didn't need to tell us anything, Alethea. We were there Saturday night. We heard what you said." The line went dead. I spent the evening alternating between fury and panic, calling everyone I could think of who might take my side. Julia was unwavering in her support, insisting that Daniel was being emotionally manipulative and weaponizing Sophie. My mother was more cautious. "Honey," Janice said carefully, "maybe you should consider apologizing. Not because you did anything wrong, but just to smooth things over. For Sophie's sake." "I shouldn't have to apologize for being honest, Mom. Sometimes being right isn't the same as being wise." But I wasn't ready to hear that. I was still convinced that everyone else was overreacting, that Daniel would come to his senses once his pride recovered. I was wrong about a lot of things, but I was especially wrong about that. The call from Daniel's lawyer came on Wednesday morning. "Mrs. Moreland, this is James Henley from Henley & Associates. I represent your husband in a legal matter, and I'd like to schedule a meeting to discuss some arrangements." My blood ran cold. "What kind of arrangements?" "I think it would be best if we discussed this in person. Would Thursday at 2 p.m. work for you?" I wanted to refuse, to hang up and pretend this wasn't happening. But something in the lawyer's tone told me that ignoring this wouldn't make it go away. "Fine," I said. "But I want to be clear that whatever Daniel thinks he's doing, we can work this out between ourselves. We don't need lawyers involved in our marriage." "Of course, Mrs. Moreland. We'll see you Thursday." I spent the next 24 hours in a state of anxious preparation. I called Julia, who offered to come with me for moral support. I practiced explaining my side of the story, emphasizing that I'd been honest and transparent, that Daniel was overreacting, that we just needed time to work through his insecurity. The law office was intimidating, all dark wood and leather-bound books. James Henley was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with kind eyes but a firm handshake. Daniel was already there when I arrived, sitting across from Henley's desk in a navy suit I'd bought him for Christmas. He looked professional, composed, and like a complete stranger. "Thank you for coming, Mrs. Moreland," Henley said, gesturing to the chair beside Daniel. "I want to start by saying that Mr. Moreland is hoping we can resolve this matter amicably, in everyone's best interests." "What matter?" I asked, though I was starting to suspect. Daniel spoke for the first time since I'd entered the room. "Alethea, I'm filing for divorce." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Daniel, you can't be serious. Over one mistake? One moment of honesty?" "It wasn't honesty," he said quietly. "It was betrayal. And it wasn't one mistake. It was a pattern of choices that showed me who you really are." "That's not fair," I said, turning to the lawyer. "Mr. Henley, my husband is clearly acting emotionally right now. We've been together for 7 years. We have a daughter. One indiscretion doesn't erase all of that." Henley glanced at Daniel, who nodded slightly. Then the lawyer opened a thick folder on his desk. "Mrs. Moreland, I need to inform you that in the state of California, adultery can be considered in custody determinations, particularly when it demonstrates a pattern of behavior that might affect the child's well-being." "Pattern of behavior?" I laughed, but it sounded shrill. "There's no pattern. I made one mistake, and I was honest about it. If anything, that shows integrity." Daniel finally looked at me directly. "Alethea, stop." "Stop what?" "Stop lying. To him, to me, to yourself." Daniel's voice was eerily calm. "Show her the folder, James." Henley slid a manila folder across the desk to me. Inside were printouts that made my heart stop. Text messages between Evan and me, going back 3 months. Screenshots of deleted messages that Daniel had somehow recovered from our shared cloud account. Bank statements showing Uber charges to Evan's neighborhood, not just once, but 7 different times over the past 2 months. "How did you—" I started. "You used our joint credit card," Daniel said simply, "and you forgot that we share a cloud backup for our phones. I've been watching this develop for weeks, Alethea. The rehearsal dinner wasn't you being honest. It was you finally getting careless enough to admit it publicly." I stared at the evidence, my mind racing. "Daniel, I can explain." "No," he said, and his voice was still that terrible, calm tone. "You can't, because there's no explanation that makes this okay. You've been having an affair for months, lying to me every day, and then you humiliated me in front of our families by bragging about it." "I wasn't bragging." "You called it a last hurrah. You laughed about it. You made jokes." For the first time, emotion crept into Daniel's voice. "Do you have any idea what that felt like? Sitting there, watching you entertain our friends and family with stories about betraying our marriage?" Henley cleared his throat gently. "Mrs. Moreland, Mr. Moreland is prepared to offer a fair settlement. He's requesting primary custody of Sophie, with supervised visitation for you initially, transitioning to standard custody pending counseling and stability assessments." "Supervised visitation?" I stood up abruptly. "You want to take my daughter away from me because I had an affair? That's insane. Daniel, you can't seriously think I'm a danger to Sophie." "I think you're a danger to Sophie's understanding of what love and commitment look like," Daniel said. "I think you're a danger to her sense of security and trust. And I think right now, you're more concerned about winning than you are about what's best for our daughter." He wasn't wrong about that last part, and the realization made me angrier. "This is ridiculous," I said to Henley. "My husband is having an emotional breakdown and making rash decisions. We don't need lawyers, we need counseling." Mrs. Moreland, Henley said gently, Mr. Moreland has already filed the papers. This meeting was a courtesy to see if we could reach an amicable agreement before the court proceedings begin. Daniel reached into his briefcase and pulled out another folder. This one was thicker, official-looking. These are the divorce papers, he said, sliding them across to me. And the custody filing. You have 30 days to respond. I stared at the documents, the legal language swimming before my eyes. This was really happening. Daniel was really going to destroy our family over this. You're making a mistake, I said, but my voice sounded small even to me. Daniel, I love you. I love our family. We can work through this. No, he said, standing up. We can't. Because you don't think you did anything wrong. You think I'm overreacting. You think this is about my ego or my insecurity. You don't understand that you broke something that can't be fixed. He paused at the door. The locks on the house have been changed. Your things are packed and in the garage. You can pick them up anytime, but I'd prefer if you called first. After he left, I sat in stunned silence, staring at the legal documents that would end my marriage. Mrs. Moreland, Henley said gently, I'd strongly recommend you retain your own counsel. This doesn't have to be adversarial, but you'll want representation. I nodded numbly, but all I could think about was how quickly everything had fallen apart. How had 7 years of marriage come down to a stack of papers and a folder full of evidence? As I walked to my car, I tried calling Julia, but it went to voicemail. I tried my mother, same thing. For the first time since this whole thing started, I felt truly alone. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal consultations, paperwork, and increasingly desperate attempts to control a narrative that had already spiraled completely out of my hands. I hired Rebecca Martinez, a family law attorney who specialized in complex custody situations, which apparently was legal speak for messy divorces involving infidelity. Your husband has built a very strong case, Rebecca told me during our first meeting. The documented pattern of deception, combined with the public nature of the disclosure, makes this challenging from a custody standpoint. But I'm her mother, I protested. Courts favor mothers, right? And it's not like I was doing drugs or abusing her. I had an affair. Lots of people have affairs. Rebecca's expression was carefully neutral. California courts prioritize the best interests of the child. The affair itself isn't necessarily disqualifying, but the pattern of deception and the impact on the child's stability are factors the judge will consider. Meanwhile, my support system was crumbling. Julia was still in my corner, but her encouragement was starting to feel desperate rather than confident. My mother had grown increasingly quiet during our phone calls, offering only vague reassurances that things would work out. The worst part was the silence from Sophie. Daniel was allowing me supervised visits twice a week, but they were awkward, stilted affairs in a sterile family services office with a social worker taking notes in the corner. Sophie seemed smaller somehow, more withdrawn. She answered my questions in monosyllables and spent most of our time together coloring or playing with toys rather than talking. "How are you doing, baby?" I asked during one visit, kneeling beside her at the small table. "Okay," she said, without looking up from her coloring book. "Do you miss Mommy?" She nodded, but still didn't meet my eyes. "Daddy says you're living at Grandma and Grandpa's house now. Are you having fun there?" Another nod. "Sophie, look at me, please." When she finally raised her eyes, I saw something that broke my heart: wariness. My 6-year-old daughter was looking at me like she wasn't sure if I was safe. "Daddy says you and him have big feelings right now," she said carefully, repeating what was obviously language from therapy sessions, and that sometimes grown-ups need space to work on their feelings. "That's right, baby, but Mommy's feelings are all worked out now. I'm ready to come home." Sophie considered this seriously. "But what about Daddy's feelings?" I didn't have a good answer for that. The social worker, Mrs. Chen, noted everything in her file. Later, I would learn that Sophie had told her she felt safer at her grandparents' house because nobody has big feelings there. My attempts to rebuild my public image weren't going much better. I'd deleted the social media post after the backlash became overwhelming, but screenshots had been shared widely enough that the damage was permanent. Former friends were avoiding me, co-workers were keeping their distance, and even casual acquaintances seemed to have heard some version of the story. I tried writing a new post, something more reflective and mature. Going through a difficult time has taught me a lot about judgment, forgiveness, and the complexity of human relationships. We're all imperfect people trying to do our best. Grateful for the friends and family who continue to show love and support during this challenging season. Growth, forgiveness, family. But even that felt hollow, and the responses were lukewarm at best. The real blow came when I learned that Daniel had enrolled Sophie in counseling with Dr. Sarah Kim, a child psychologist who specialized in family transitions. According to the court documents, Dr. Kim would be evaluating Sophie's adjustment and making recommendations about custody arrangements. "She's weaponizing our daughter against me," I told Rebecca during one of our meetings, "using therapy to make Sophie think I'm the bad guy." "Mrs. Moreland," Rebecca said carefully, "Dr. Kim is a court-appointed neutral party. Her job is to assess what's best for Sophie, not to take sides. And from what I can see in the preliminary reports, Sophie is actually doing quite well in her current environment. Because Daniel is poisoning her against me. The reports don't indicate any parental alienation. They do note that Sophie feels more secure in a stable environment, but that's not the same thing." I was losing, and I could feel it. Every legal maneuver Daniel made was measured, reasonable, and backed by documentation. Every move I made felt desperate and reactive. The final straw came when I learned that Helen had blocked my number and Daniel had filed a restraining order preventing me from coming to his parents' house unannounced. Apparently, I'd been harassing them with phone calls and unexpected visits. "I was trying to see my daughter," I protested to Rebecca. "You violated the custody agreement by attempting unsupervised contact," she replied. "Mrs. Moreland, you need to understand that every action you take right now is being documented and evaluated. The court is watching how you handle this process." That night, alone in the studio apartment I'd rented with money from our joint savings account, before Daniel froze it, I finally let myself cry. Not the angry, frustrated tears I'd shed over the past month, but deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from somewhere I hadn't accessed in years. For the first time since this whole thing started, I wondered if maybe, just maybe, I had actually done something wrong, but even as the thought occurred to me, I pushed it away. Daniel was being vindictive. The system was biased. Everyone was overreacting to one mistake, one moment of poor judgment. I wasn't ready to face the possibility that the problem might be me. The final custody hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in late September. I'd spent weeks preparing with Rebecca, rehearsing answers to potential questions and trying to present myself as a stable, reformed mother who deserved another chance. "Remember," Rebecca coached me, "show accountability without admitting fault that could hurt us legally. Express remorse for the impact on Sophie, but don't characterize your actions as abusive or neglectful." It was a delicate balance, appearing sorry enough to seem human, but not so sorry as to justify Daniel's custody request. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, sterile and fluorescent lit. Daniel sat across the aisle with his attorney, looking composed in the same navy suit he'd worn to our first legal meeting. He didn't look at me when I entered. Judge Patricia Hawthorne was a woman in her 50s with silver hair and sharp eyes that seemed to see everything. She reviewed our case file with the efficiency of someone who'd seen it all before. "This is a custody determination hearing in the matter of Moreland vs. Moreland," she began. "I've reviewed the submitted documentation, including the child welfare evaluation, therapy reports, and financial disclosures. I'd like to hear from both parties before making my determination." Daniel's attorney went first, painting a picture of a stable, devoted father who had prioritized his daughter's well-being throughout a difficult situation. They presented evidence of Sophie's improved behavior in Daniel's care, her positive response to therapy, and her expressed preference for her current living situation. Then it was my turn. "Your Honor," Rebecca began, "Mrs. Moreland acknowledges that she made mistakes that damaged her marriage. However, those mistakes don't make her an unfit mother. She's completed voluntary counseling, maintained stable employment, and consistently demonstrated her love and commitment to her daughter during supervised visits." I took the stand and delivered the speech Rebecca and I had practiced. I talked about learning from my mistakes, about the importance of Sophie having both parents in her life, about my commitment to rebuilding trust through my actions. It sounded good. It might have even been partly true. But then Judge Hawthorne asked the question that unraveled everything. "Mrs. Moreland, in your own words, can you explain what you believe went wrong in your marriage?" I looked at Rebecca, who nodded encouragingly. This was my chance to show accountability and maturity. "Your Honor, I think what happened was a failure of communication. My husband and I had different expectations about honesty and transparency in our relationship. When I tried to be open about my emotional needs and my process of getting closure with someone from my past, Daniel reacted very strongly. I understand that my timing was poor. Discussing it at our rehearsal dinner was insensitive. But I believe that if we'd had better communication tools, we could have worked through this together." The words felt right as I said them. Reasonable, mature, accountable, without being self-destructive. But Judge Hawthorne's expression didn't change. "Mrs. Moreland, are you characterizing your extramarital affair as a communication problem?" I felt the ground shifting under me. "Your Honor, I'm saying that the way I handled the situation could have been better. I should have discussed my need for closure with my husband before acting on it." "So you're acknowledging that you should have told your husband before having sexual relations with another man?" The clinical language made it sound even worse somehow. "Yes, Your Honor." "And you believe that if you had told him in advance, he would have been supportive of your decision to commit adultery?" I was trapped. Anything I said now would either make me sound delusional or would undermine my entire defense. I believe we could have found a solution that worked for both of us." Judge Hawthorne made a note in her file. "Mrs. Moreland, I've read the transcript of your statements at the rehearsal dinner. You referred to your affair as a last hurrah and joked about your husband's reaction. Does that sound like someone who was trying to communicate about emotional needs?" My mouth went dry. "Your Honor, I was nervous and trying to make light of a difficult situation. I didn't mean to sound callous." "But you did sound callous, didn't you? To your husband, to your families, to your daughter who was present that evening?" Sophie had been there. I'd somehow forgotten that detail, blocked it out. She'd been at the kids' table, but she'd been there when I'd made my announcement. "Yes, Your Honor." Judge Hawthorne closed the file and looked at both attorneys. "I've made my decision. Primary physical custody of the minor child Sophie Moreland is awarded to the father, Daniel Moreland. Mrs. Moreland is granted supervised visitation twice weekly for the next 6 months, after which we'll review the arrangement based on her progress in counseling and her demonstrated ability to prioritize her daughter's well-being over her own desires." The gavel came down with a finality that echoed through my chest. I'd lost. Outside the courthouse, Rebecca tried to be encouraging. "This isn't permanent, Alethea. If you complete the counseling requirements and demonstrate stability, we can petition for increased custody in 6 months." But I barely heard her. I was thinking about Sophie at the rehearsal dinner, sitting at the kids' table with her cousins, probably not understanding the words I was saying, but sensing the tension, the shock, the way all the adults suddenly went quiet. I'd humiliated my husband in front of our families. I'd confused and frightened my daughter. I'd destroyed my marriage and lost my child, and I'd done it all while telling myself I was just being honest. That evening, I drove to Daniel's parents' house. I knew I wasn't supposed to be there, knew it violated the restraining order, but I needed to see Sophie. I needed to apologize, to explain, to somehow undo the damage I'd done. I parked across the street and watched through the living room window. Sophie was on the floor, playing with blocks while Daniel sat nearby reading. Helen was in the kitchen, probably making dinner. It looked peaceful, stable, safe. Everything I'd destroyed. As I sat there, Daniel looked up and saw me through the window. Our eyes met across the distance, and for a moment, I thought I saw something other than anger in his expression. Sadness, maybe. Or pity. He got up and closed the curtains. I sat in my car for another hour, holding the court documents that had made everything official. Primary custody to Daniel. Supervised visits for me. Division of assets that left me with almost nothing, since most of our savings had been spent on legal fees. My phone buzzed with a text from Julia. "I'm so sorry, sis. This is so unfair. Daniel will regret this when Sophie gets older and realizes what he did to you." But as I watched the warm light from the windows of the house where my daughter was safe and loved and stable, I realized that Julia was wrong. Sophie wouldn't resent Daniel for protecting her from me. She'd probably thank him. I started the car and drove back to my empty apartment, finally understanding that I'd lost everything by my own choices. I'd prioritized my own desires over my family's well-being, my own narrative over the truth, my own need to be right over everyone else's need to feel safe. The man I'd married had turned everything upside down, but not because I'd told the truth, because I'd finally told enough of it for him to see who I really was, and he'd decided his daughter deserved better. He was right. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching,